Right. Last time I checked, the Damned doesn't have dealt with the waves of the Whale of the Porous Hand, along with its mermaids. This is what happened after. After their encounter with the Whale of the Porous Hand, Ishmael was lost in thought, looking over the side of Mephistopheles. She considered the lake. When she looked into its waters, she saw her shimmering reflection. Believing that she's just as refracted and twisted as her reflection in the water, she sees herself as so warped, so unstable, no matter what lake she's on. Dante was silent during this. They observed her musings as they were still on their way to the elusive Lobotomy Corporation branch facility. It being a while since the last incident. Ishmael believing that her distorted reflections are just her. Dante decided to watch her for a moment. They wanted to see what she was looking at. Her hands were peeling, bleeding. Then we see her vision of her past, as she spoke of salt water seeping into her gaping wounds. It hurt much, believing that she might faint if she didn't let go, but she couldn't. Then she asked herself what she was holding on to. Just as Dante was about to say something, Rutis called out to them to say that a matter had appeared that required their urgent attention. They were approaching their next coordinates. They understood, and Ishmael wanted to see what this was as well. Once inside, she asked what was ahead. Rutis said that their radar caught something, and they have a visual on a solitary ship. They have 3 hours before they can move on to the next lake, unless Dante would authorize them to weather the waves once more. Dante said it in a polite way, and said no. Rutis, the losses were worse than they anticipated last time, and Ishmael said that they were extremely lucky that the waves were relatively manageable one. Personally, I'd say, no. You died more than I expected you to. I failed it every time I brought your back. Ishmael said that we were lucky to get out of that with our genitals intact. Do you really think that we'd survive that one if we had to deal with the waves of hentai again? Rutis deferred to their judgment. They then observed this ship. Sinclair observed that this wasn't a pirate ship. Then Don Quixote was even more excited than she usually is, seeing it as a mini cruise ship, a vessel of partying. Even from that distance, there were colourful balloons and banners decorating the ship. Don Quixote made it clear what she loved, to party. Seriously, she's even nuttier than usual. Get your priority straight. You're in the middle of the Great Lake, a place where whales can turn you into a monstrous-looking mermaid, along with other unexplainable phenomena that can appear, and at this point, you want to go on that party boat? She even noted that no matter how much she frolics, leaps, runs and shouts there, none would be off. Rodia, expecting Virgilius to react aggressively towards the mad blonde, she asked him to go easy on her. He just stood there in silence. Then, Rodia remembered that they sell local delicacies there. Liquor and treats not found anywhere else in the city. They both looked at Virgilius, and then at Dante. Virgilius wanted to stay out of this. Dante wanted them to go there because they might know something about the branch facility or the LCCB agents. While this was going on, Don Quixote was trying to imitate the Marlin dance that was observed back at the club in Marlin Port. She then shouted at the ship, wanted to ask a few questions, but the music was the only thing that could be heard. Gregor understood this and didn't get music these days. He understood that it'd be easier to ask them in person. Dante told them that they could go there to get some info. They had time before they needed to head to the next lake. Ishmael shot a glance at Virgilius before she stared at the floor wordlessly. She then said that this was a reckless idea to row up to a random vessel that they know nothing about, either its owner or its history. But if Dante insists, they stop by. Heathcliff saw this as something that Urtis would normally say. Ishmael said that this was an attitude that she chose to adopt, partly because her hands were tied. Then they boarded a skiff, Faust seeing it as useful, Yi Sang asking if that boat would capsize. Sinclair, worried about this, asked if they could, rather should, pack life vests or a buoy. They'd all squeeze in. The skiff was packed and swaying, and it did not inspire confidence in some of them. Dante tried to reassure them that they'd bring them back if they drowned and everything would be fine. And this attempt at reassuring them failed miserably, based on Sinclair's nervous look. Dante awkwardly said that they were joking. Virgilius, from the safety of Mephistopheles, told them to drink responsibly, which was out of character as far as Dante was concerned. Perhaps he knew something that they didn't. As they got closer to the mini cruise ship, Dante still couldn't see anyone on the deck. Don Quixote decided to shout so loud that they'd be able to hear them. Heathcliff was annoyed by this, telling her to shut it. She's bursting his eardrums. Gregor asked if it was okay for them to barge into, or rather onto, a yacht party like that, as they don't have an invite. Roger wasn't too concerned about that, believing that they'd understand. Ishmael doesn't give a about the party. They're there to gather intel, threatening to leave them behind if they waste any more time than needed. When on board, Sinclair saw it as fancy. Yeah, clearly fancier than the moderately affluent upper-middle-class household that he was a part of. There were signs that a party did occur there. Liquor bottles and half-eaten food, but no people. Massault saw this party as ending recently and abruptly. Don Quixote saw lighting from the ship's interiors, wanting to go inside quickly to check on that. Rushing there without waiting for a response. Heathcliff thankful for small mercies, as that was one loudmouth gone, and deciding to do everyone a favour, everyone else that was there, by silencing the club music from the loudspeaker by smashing it with his baseball bat, seeing it as a relief as he felt his eardrums were about to burst. Well, clearly South Korea hasn't heard of cricket. Actually, considering how boring that was, where test matches can last up to 5 days, It's probably for the best that they haven't heard of it. On the other hand, it'd be a shame, as I think he'd be better off wielding a cricket bat. Anyway, Dante decided not to comment on that, as it was pretty loud. It will also mask the approach of anything that might threaten them. Gregor noticing that it was quiet thanks to this. Then Honglu remembered a story that his nanny used to tell him. An old story. Then Don Quixote returned with a dumbfounded expression on her face. She found nothing inside. Rodia wanted to know what there was nothing of. Don Quixote clarified that by saying it's people. The lights were left on, but no one was inside. Urtis saw this as ridiculous, as not that long ago they saw a large group of people partying on the deck. Don Quixote knew what she saw, believing that they're playing hide and seek. Don Quixote, while they're not... Well, that's not your craziest idea. It's also highly unlikely. Gregor suddenly thought so. Ishmael didn't seem too concerned about them vanishing into thin air. Then she asked if the waves already... Then Masot noted that they might be in the ship's storage space. Rodia asked if he's suggesting that the party people that left all the uneaten food and liquor were huddling inside that storage space. Then Honglu remembered the story about his... Well, rather, that his equivalent of Mary Poppins told him. Once, a huge manor sent out invitations for a grand party, but when the guests arrived, they found the manor vacant and engulfed in deathly silence. Sinclair was so nervous he wanted to get the music going again. Sadly, Heathcliff told him that he smashed the radio. Ishmael noted that they had to get off that ship if it was struck by the waves. Honglu then continued his story. Then, boom, boom, banging noises, coming from behind a door slightly ajar. So of course, they went in there to investigate, and Don Quixote was disturbingly excited and wanted to know more. Sinclair would rather not know. Honglu then told them, there they were, bodies as stiff as corpses in rigor mortis, arms stretched forward, hopping up and down. Sinclair then volunteered to go check out the storage space. Don Quixote noting that his palms were sweating. He passed that off as genetics. He hurried to the storage space of the ship. Then Honglu said that it was the dance that was all the rage back then, apparently. Don Quixote didn't see what the appeal of that dancing was. Heathcliff saw it as stupid, thinking that this was actually going somewhere. Yi Sang thought that it'd be a tale of the living dead. Rodia asked why he did that. Sinclair was scared off, asking where he went. Dante told them that they'd find him. Clearly they saw Honglu's story as a spoonful of to make the medicine vomit all over the floor, as it had no relevance to what they were doing. That story was likely involving a mass hanging, although it's unclear if they were forced into that or if it was due to suicide. Dante noted how dark it was in there. The hallway to the storage area was narrower than the party deck. Only faint, flashing lights were available to guide them through the dark hallway. Proceeding through it carefully, they considered that place creepier than the manor that was in Honglu's story. To be honest, It sounds like a place that the Addams family would go on for vacation, considering that in at least one version, Gomez and Morticia considered a loony bin as a decent place to stay for the night. Sinclair was called for by them, water droplets falling on them, not knowing where they came from. They were starting to annoy Dante, and they couldn't see anything, even if it was bright in there. A faint ray of light was seen, and Dante found Sinclair, who was standing still in the light for a good while. They weren't sure how long, but he was standing there. Just standing there, still like death, looking up. Dante asked what he was looking at, then asking themselves where the light came from. There was no lamp near where Sinclair stood, nor was there any artificial light source. It wasn't coming from outside, as there was no opening for even a single strand of light, and this was even if it wasn't night. This didn't feel right to Dante, who ordered Sinclair to get out of there. When he was unresponsive, Dante ordered him to run, now! There was an intensification of the fear of the unknown. What was seen defied any common sense, but they had to get Sinclair out of there. They snatched and tugged his limp wrist to get that traumatized orphan out of there. Dante told him to wake up, which snapped him out of it, and he ran out of there screaming. Heathcliff thought that he'd lost the plot, wanting to know what he was screaming about. Sinclair spoke quickly, but I'll give you the slow version. He said, "There was a person floating in the air, a person in the air floating, someone was up there just suspended in the air." And this creeped Roger out. Ishmael didn't think it was a person. Roger was about to say what she thought about this, but Ishmael didn't have time for a lecture. It was time for battle. Then they fought the mermaid, or rather, the mermaids of the Fountain Strands, left over from when a wave hit that vessel, which looked like a mix of leech, squid, and horse. Despite the psychologically damaging effects that these mermaids have, they were all wiped out by those band of emotional retards. After they had some time to think, Dante understood that they were mermaids. Ishmael understood that whoever was on that ship was likely about as distracted about the party as Don Quixote was to realize that they stayed in that lake for far too long. So, as Dante completed that thought, they ended up being devoured by the whale. The deserted ship that they were on was the aftermath. Ishmael told them that even if they stuck to every law of the lake, depending on the wave type, getting too close to the ship that broke that law, you could get swept in the aftermath. Dante noted that a single lapse of judgment led to this, remembering her mutterings and her biting words. The cold, hard truth of the reality of the Great Lake that Ishmael was forced to endure before joining the Damned Dozen. A place where the smallest of mistakes could mean total annihilation. A place of endless struggle for survival against unknown threats. While this is thought of, they imagined what the whale was like as it attacked this ship. Dante now had a greater understanding of what Ishmael had to go through. they'd have been more understanding if they had known this earlier, remembering their arguments at the boatworks. Otis pointed out that while they've exhausted the immediate number of the mermaids, lingering any longer might lure the rest of them there. The party was over. They should leave. They wasted no time in doing so. Sometime after, Dante said that they didn't find anything. They made the wrong call. They shouldn't have made such a rash decision. Ishmael was silent for a few seconds before speaking, saying that it was okay. At least they're alive. Well, it was okay by her standards, at least. And by her standards, that's actually quite subdued of her. Yi-Sang noted that it was fortunate they were able to procure some ration for the journey ahead from that ship. So, it wasn't a complete waste of time. Then Otis noted that something large was on the radar. Faust observed that it was very close to the center of the coordinates. Otis understood this to mean that it was... And Gregor completed that sentence by saying that it was the Lobotomy Corporation branch facility of District 21. Ishmael, upon hearing this, wanted to go out for some air. Dante saw that she was going outside to the ship's railings. They considered following her like they did earlier, but they decided not to, as she needed time to think about things on her own. She told herself to get her together, to bury her feelings for them. She had a mission to see through to the end. The only mission. She sharpened her harpoon for that moment. She has to be colder, harsher. She has a mission that she can't fail. She implied that she would kill any that stood in her way of that. The whales are as varied as they are horrifying. One of the most horrifying, outside of a select few, is the whale of the 1,000 strands. Not many have seen this whale, but those that have done so, they see it from afar, where they see the strands fish up their human prey, like humans would fish up the marine life of the Great Lake, and those that it devours comes out as mermaids, that vaguely resemble the horse in appearance, with a mix of leech and squid thrown in. Those that have encountered this mermaid have to take care not to lose their minds and snap, like driftwood exposed to the water for far too long. Perhaps it is thankful that this whale can't be approached too closely, as fewer would live to speak of it than the whale of the Porous Hand. Virgilius was outside and saw the branch facility ahead. Sinclair asked him if the survivors of the before team were still there. Yi-Sang said that unless something happened since then, they still have time. While they were speaking, Dante saw the branch facility, which vaguely resembles an oil rig, which loomed ever closer, out of the mist and into their line of sight. Dante saw it as creepy. All but Ryoshu froze. Gregor asked if that was the branch facility, understandably nervous. Faust then saw that they were as close as it was physically possible to be to the center of the area of the coordinates. The size and appearance of the structure matched the intel. Something caught Ishmael's attention. This was enough to shut everyone up. The notion of survivors was now too optimistic to consider. Masson observed the Lobotomy Corporation logo between the white materials. Rodia asking if that's really... Well, only the logo could be made out. The rest of the structure was covered in glistening mounds of pallid white, the reality of their situation. Gregor wanted to know what happened there. Honglu remembered that pilot told them that the last thing that the Twin Hook pirates said before leaving was, "The calamity was coming." Yi Sang was reminded of the earlier days within the Bosmi Corporation branch facility, when he was having his first mission with Limbus Company. Specifically remembering the branch facility of District 4, what that was like. Roger found this reminder to be revolting, hoping that there wasn't any poison gas traps this time. Mersault found this unlikely, as that time Hopkins was a traitor who wanted to kill them so that he could take the enkephalin for himself. The greedy. That's the main difference between fixer officers and syndicates. With fixer officers, it's everyone for themselves. They would backstab, lie, and cheat just to get the last order of passion. Never mind anything more. The syndicates, on the other hand, they don't typically betray their own. Gregor doubted that it'd be much better in the branch facility of District 21, if not worse. Sinclair feared the worst. Specifically that Pilot's team was officially boned. Urtis was slightly more hopeful. She considered them lucky if they didn't turn into mermaids. Dante understood that the calamity was... They didn't speak this, but they understood that it didn't destroy the Lobotomy Corporation branch. It transformed it into what they saw now. Something so grotesque that total obliteration would have been better. Virgilia seeing destruction as not the only calamity in that world. The Great Lake is home to 5 calamities. Well, 4 now. Implying that someone has managed to somehow kill one of them before they arrived in the Great Lake. Yi Sang wanted to know what he meant. Virgilius meant that... Then he stopped, telling them that they'll find out soon enough. Ishmael, knowing more than most, didn't see it mattering how careful they were. The calamities would always find them in the Great Lake. The laws of the Great Lake don't apply to them, so they're unpredictable. Virgilius told them to row their way into the ruins that this calamity left behind, to take a skiff to the branch facility. It's on the lake adjacent to that one. Dante asked if this was a good time for him to come with them. Gregor replied by asking who knows what he's thinking. Faust lowered the skiff into the water, the same one that they used to get onto the cruise ship. Honglu noting that they're getting a lot of use out of this skiff. Rodia not trusting it, seeing it as too small. Regardless, they headed into the branch facility. Sinclair asking if lakes are usually that foggy. The lake earlier was pretty misty too. Don Quixote didn't seem that concerned about it, although she understood that ambushes could occur in such areas. When they arrived, there was a growing sense of trepidation among them, as they climbed the pale membrane-enveloped stairs leading up to the branch facility. Rodia asked Dante if they could sense the Golden Bough. Dante told her, not yet. She asked them if they were sure of that. The disappointment was clear. She wanted to believe that they'd tell her that it wasn't there so they could head back to Mephistopheles. But Rodia understood that she worried more than most of them. But she was especially having a bad feeling about this. The closer to the entrance, the more reluctant they wanted to enter. as if they were growing increasingly wary of some invisible enemy that could ambush them. Ishmael was asking them, "What were they waiting for?" Gregor was asking if she could feel it as well, the dread, thinking that it affects her the most. She spent years on the Great Lake. You also forget how you can be desensitized to that kind of thing, considering your experiences in the Smoke War. She asks what was stopping him, and Gregor was struggling to find an answer. She told them to wait at the entrance if they're not going in. Heathcliff told Gregor to give up on talking sense, as he did a while ago. Gregor thought that she was getting a bit more cooperative of late, believing that he was mistaken. Roger understanding that they need to go and get this over with. Ishmael clearly wasn't there for the Golden Bough, nor the bone-chilling horrors of the lake. Dante was starting to believe that only her mission mattered, and she saw them as something that could get in the way. Inside wasn't much better. It had the same pallid membrane. Yisang wanted to know what it was. Sinclair thought it was mold. Ryushu said IF, or insufficient facts. Yisang didn't see it as fungi, as it didn't exhibit the characteristics of that. Urutis didn't see it as that either. It was organic living flesh tissue, complete with blood vessels, grown into random shapes without purpose or intent. Ryushu saw it as ridiculous. She was surrounded by IF. So she was saying, "Idiot!" Urutis wanted to know what she meant by that. Ryushu clarified by saying that art reliant on the chaos of existence doesn't create patterns such as these, telling her to look at the big picture. Yisang only saw pointless disruption that wastes their lives. Urutis regretting getting involved in this. Yisang then pointed out that Ishmael had gone ahead of them while they were talking. She didn't seem interested in their conversation. Don Quixote was concerned at the sight of what she saw in the wall. Rodia wanted to know what she was looking at. She pointed out what was in the wall, and Roger was now sure of what she was talking about. Don Quixote told her that there was a person in the wall. Rodia saw this as a sculpture. Ryushu said that if there was anyone capable of sculpting something so true to life as that, she'd drop everything and plead the artist to take her as their student. Roger was mildly disgusted at this. Sinclair suspected that they were the people Pilot was looking for. Yes, Pilot. The one that thankfully wasn't there. Don Quixote tried to reach those within the wall, Rodia not understanding why she was talking to that. One of the embedded LCCB agents was making noises. Don Quixote saw that man as alive. Rodia saw this as worse than death. It made her feel queasy. Faust and Yisang had little to say about this. Don Quixote believed that they should free them from being bound in the wall. The usually optimistic Honglu understood that there's no helping them. Roger knew that they couldn't get them out without cutting them into pieces. Don Quixote was shocked by this. Gregor told them that they should be used to those failures by now. Masson understood that this body was firmly lodged in the walls. No ordinary human strength could separate this body from it. Superhuman strength could do it, but it risked tearing the body to several parts. Don Quixote saw this as an evil that can't go unanswered. Ryushu saw it as impressive that there's no sign of anyone forcing it into the walls, seeing it quite a natural exhibition, as though that was how it was conceived from the very beginning. Sinclair thought that it would be different this time. They made a promise, gave their word. Welcome to Grimdark! It'd be too bright if they survived, and as Sans would put it, this is why I don't like making promises. Yi Sang was silent during this. Ishmael wasn't concerned about this. She told Dante that staring at them wouldn't magically summon the Golden Bough to their palms, telling them to say something to get on with this. Dante understood that they could do nothing for them, but they couldn't not think about this. Ishmael didn't want to waste time. Honglu didn't see anything to worry about, the laws of the lake there, so why not make it more leisurely? Ishmael didn't stop him, but he wouldn't find that there. Don Quixote was angered by this, as the proof of otherwise was right there. Ishmael didn't see them as alive, only pretending to be. Don Quixote didn't accept that. She recognized that their ruin left behind by that. The thing that left nothing unchanged in its wake. It could swallow the world in a blink of an eye. But it's also spewed it back out just as quickly. Then what it spewed out never comes back right. Why devour something if it's spewed out after? Why did it try to devour everything that it came across? Dante was asking if this was the same whale that she spoke of before. Ishmael was quiet about that. Don Quixote wasn't informed of such a terrifying whale, asking if it was truly a whale. Ishmael then looked almost amused, asking why did they not listen when she told them that they weren't ready. If they did, at least they could have been in the right headspace for the lake, but no. Dante was asking her if she's saying that whale she met was what devoured that building. Ishmael said yes. Dante asked how she can be sure of that. Ishmael told them that it's because that pale ruin is what the whale left behind. Everything turned pallid, like that building. Then an LCCB agent, or at least what resembled one, said, Wootis had a visual on a suspicious individual. Sinclair asked if it was an abnormality, as this was a branch facility. Roger wanted to chop it down, with that idea in mind. Then Ishmael saw what could be a survivor. Urtis asking which it was to make up her mind. She did. That's why it's so incredible. Urtis cautioned her. Dante warned Ishmael not to get too close, but she approached the possible survivor. Sinclair suspected that she might be mind-controlled by the abnormality. Well, an abnormality that might be near, anyway. Masson saw no signs on her. Certainly not in her eyes. The LCCB agent, or at least what looks like one, said, "Heh, la." The closer Ishmael got, the more of the figure's body was taken over by the pallid off-white membrane. The voice grew increasingly incoherent, and the voice... This surprised Ishmael, believing that it was impossible. Before, it was talking like a human. Dante was worried, asking if she wasn't the only one that saw it. And Dante told her to get away from... Ishmael couldn't believe that this was real. If what she has known about this her whole life, about this place, about the Great Lake. Massault saw that she was experiencing heightened emotions. Dante was getting irritated by Ishmael's behavior. They could have asked one of the others to stop her, but before they realized what they were doing, they were running towards Ishmael. It was likely guilt that pushed her to act. Guilt that was a part that played in driving Ishmael to that point. You sang caution, Dante. Then Ishmael realized the truth. Guilt can sometimes help. The figure's face shifted again as they approached Ishmael. Yes, as they approached, the white membrane covering the face began to withdraw, as though an unseen force was peeling off its skin. The mouth didn't come back, but the eyes looked at them. They were human-shaped, blinking with efforts. Ishmael noting that the membrane was gone. When Dante approached them, the white membrane faded. Faust noting that the Golden Bough appeared to counteract its effects. As she approached, she told Dante that the shard of the Golden Bough lodged into their clock was counteracting the infection of the palidation effect to that degree. The figure could understand what they were saying. Ishmael was finding it hard to understand this, that a Golden Bough could turn a mermaid back into a human. Was that what she was saying? While that... Yes, Faust found that theory hadn't been properly cross-examined. Ishmael told her to tell her if it's possible. Her voice was never full of such desperation before. Faust theorized that it might be limited to mermaids of the whale that presumably devoured that structure. Ishmael found that bitterly amusing. She asked, what were they? Where they realized that there was something that she could have done about that. Then she recalled the memories of that day. The nightmare that she tried to lock away. It was coming back before her eyes. She had a vacant look in her eyes as she saw them. Vomited from the whale. Sinking. Floating in the briny sea. All of them. Asking if Dante heard it too. Believing that they saw the waves that roared that day. Dante admitted that she was right. Emotions of the past began flooding, roaring before them, standing alone in a sea of tall, rolling waves. They nodded. Once she was a sailor, a seafarer, a fixer. She was somewhere in the middle. They were called whalers. Do they understand? Do they see them? Does she look on the faces of those that dared to wager everything, and those who had nothing to wager? Whaling ships carried people like them across the waves. Dante asked if she saw it herself, the whale that devoured that place. Ishmael told them that the whales that they've met so far transform those they devour into something completely different, into something utterly unrecognizable from what they were before by rearranging and replacing their whole body. But that whale was different. That one. Well, those devoured by the pallid whale weren't transformed. They were still themselves, just wrapped in a pale membrane. But it's a stretch to say that they're still fully themselves. Sometimes they'd sail their ship towards the outskirts, that they'd see those ships, those false ships. The ships turned completely pallid. It's an old wisdom among whalers that those ships must be avoided at all cost, even if it meant going all the way around the lake that they're in. Because the sailors consumed by that whale retain everything, their habits, their skills, except they wander the lake only to attack everything they come across. The captain of the Pequod, their ship, she had a mission to hunt that pallid whale with her own two hands. The entire time they sailed on the Pequod, she sermonized their ears off with, well, about what a worthy, honourable mission it was to hunt down that whale. It was annoying, and they knew that she wasn't exactly all there, but no. Maybe she just knew how to sink the rest of them to the depths of her insanity. Her mission would become their own. To hunt down the pallid whale became their salvation, their destiny. The captain drove everyone on that ship mad. When the time finally came to face that whale, it was all hatred. All evils of the world would sprout from it. They were promptly crushed, devoured, reduced to a scattered pile of driftwood. Well, the ship was anyway. And when she came to, floating in the vast coldness of the sea, holding on to her dear life to a piece of driftwood, there was nothing left. Nothing. When she realized what she was holding onto wasn't a piece of driftwood, but That's why she could never forgive her. At a certain point, it stopped being a conversation. Her words were growing aimless, like a vortex of the sea, endlessly whirling in place. Dante understood better what Ishmael's mission was, where the tip of that razor-sharp harpoon was aimed. It was aimed at the captain that drove her to damnation. An overwhelming tide of hatred and obsession burned fiercely in her direction. She told Dante that she was going to kill her with her own two hands. Dante saw this as pointless to convince her otherwise. Ishmael's obsession was rooted in a glimpse of her old captain, which wouldn't help any of them right now. Dante said that Ishmael didn't know if her captain was still alive. Ishmael was desperately hanging on to her best mate's coffin. Something who she shared everything. Yes. She shared everything with this best mate. And that's when she, through the tempest, saw the captain. Ishmael saw that standing alone, facing down that whale as it devoured their ship, laughing mad. So she is even more insane than Don Quixote. Quite an achievement. Her fiercely loyal crew was floating on the surface of the outskirts sea, powerless to do anything. But wait until they too were devoured. But none of that mattered to her. That was alive. She had to be alive. She had to be. So she had to find her. They have to. Not before they kill the captain. Dante didn't know what to say about Ishmael. Dante was asking to themselves what "we" she was referring to, but she was starting to think that nothing they say would improve anything if it didn't outright bring everything crashing down. That was when an imperceptibly light breeze broke through the silence. A solitary butterfly, something out of place in that branch facility, as it moved with grace tinged with fragility, as if they didn't fear the weight of that heavy silence. She took a moment to gently flutter onto a puddle. Rather, it did so. Ishmael saw this, and Faust commented on what it appeared to be. Ryoshu didn't see this as an ordinary butterfly. Not there. The butterfly fluttered its wings and took off once again. Sinclair suspected that it was asking them to follow. Heathcliff asked if this was an abnormality. He was hoping that they'd show up. Yi-Sang was silent. Dante saw this as a trap, but they're lost. And they needed a direction to go into, so they were in agreement. They were also intrigued by the butterfly. As for the LCCB agent that was palidified, Sinclair was asking what it was saying. They've been lending them her ear, yet none have been able to reach that agent. They were speaking in a certain pattern, though deciphering it didn't seem possible, seeing it as a code, a mix of sound frequencies and encryption patterns. Don Quixote was at the far back of the line, still looking back at the figure. She understood that without Dante, there could be no resolution to their predicament. When Dante walks away, the pallid membrane grew over the face again, burying it. It began to shamble. It's as Ishmael said. Will they roam the Great Lake, attacking everyone and everything they come across? Not only their physical senses, but also their sense of self, forgotten deep under the pallid membrane. Yes, I know. The branch facility is not as lifeless as it appears, just not in the way they'd like. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!